And good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Heather Higgins, and I will be taking this session this afternoon. So welcome to BTEC National 2016 Health and Social Care. And this is to help you get started to teach BTEC Nationals for new centres for health and social care. So welcome all. And yeah, obviously my name's at the top. I am the Senior Standards Verifier for this qualification. And the idea this afternoon is to look at best practice in preparation, planning and delivery. So first of all, we're going to go through the objectives. This is what we aim to have covered by the time you finish at 5 o'clock this afternoon. So setting up your course, an overview of the course structure, guidance around how to deliver internal and external units, overview of the types of assessments in the qualification and the assessment requirements, guidance around external assessments, including assessment methods, delivery models, and preparing for external assessments. Right, here we go. So first of all, we're going to look at setting up your course, key roles and resources for preparation. Okay, so first of all, there's the head of centre. Now you may, if you're in a school, you may call them the head teacher, it may be the principal, but formally they're responsible for the management and delivery of BTEC at your centre. Now, they generally may not have a lot to do with the courses, and obviously you're on the chalk face, you're actually taking the most responsibility. But their main responsibility is to ensure that your college acts in accordance with our conditions of approval, regulations, and any other terms and conditions of policies. So if Ofsted comes, they will want to talk to the head. If the regulator, Ofqual, decides to pay a visit, it will be them that they will be the head of centre that will be them that talking to. I'll talk later about standards verification, but our SV, when they contact you, they will formally contact either the head of centre or the next person, which should trickle down to you. I hope it does. So quality nominee, QN, we may be referring to quality nominee as QM. They are Pearson's main point of contact for quality assurance in your centre and responsible for ensuring effective management of your BTEC programmes. And it will be to them that we send the SV report when we've sampled work, this time of the year normally. And hopefully the SV will copy you in as well, but they will definitely get the report. Exam officer, EO. Pearson's point of contact for administration at your centre. The exams officer is responsible for ensuring learners are registered on time and correctly. And if it's your first time and you're not familiar with the system, please ask your exams officer, once you've put the names in for registration, you filled in the form, you want a copy of that so that you know your learners are registered and they have the Pearson numbers. So that if your SV contacts you, for example, and says, I can't find Lucy Brown's number on my list, your exams officer and you should have a copy of that. So you would be able to pass that on. Okay, looking at some more people, very important people, all in your centre. So a program leader or a program manager then has overall responsibility for the effective delivery and assessment of BTEC qualifications for entry to level 3 qualifications. They may also act as a lead internal verifier if appropriate, and we'll look at the lead internal verifier now. So they act as a single point of accountability for quality assurance across a subject area. So they may be responsible for level 2 and 3. They may also be responsible for entry level up to level 1 and then as far as level 3. So they have a lot on their shoulders, but you can actually have a lead internal verifier if you wish, if that works for your centre better, to have one for level 2 and one for level 3. Now, a centre, obviously no names, but I've just been working with, they had one for the entry 3 to level 1, and then another one for levels 2 and 3. That seemed to work better for them. Internal verifier, I'll go back to the internal verifier, sorry. They have to have records of all internal verification, and it's their job to ensure that every assessor who is involved in delivering the program has been internally verified, in other words, to standardize over the years. So it's the internal verifier's job to look at the assessment decisions, but the lead internal verifier must know which assessors have been checked. Now, it's great if you can look at all the learners over the year, but it doesn't always happen. But if your lead IB has a record that all the assessors are marking to the same standards, that's really what we're looking for, then that's important. So they should have a folder, it doesn't have to be a big portfolio. And so as an IB, you would sample the assessment decisions and you would give a copy of that to the lead IB. Because if someone like Ofsted or more likely Ofqual, the regulator, comes in, they will want to see that. So it's important that you have it. As an IB, then, you're responsible for ensuring assessment decisions are consistent across the programme. And if you, as an IB, you're not happy, you can ask to see a larger sample. If you need them remarking, that's fine if that's your judgment. But I would strongly recommend that you give the assessor a set time to have them back to you, because otherwise, you know what it's like in a busy centre. I worked in a big FE college for years, and things get missed, things get forgotten because you've gone to the next thing. Internal verifiers are usually assessors also, but you can't internally verify your own assignment briefs and assessment decisions. So as an IB, you can write your own assignment briefs, you can teach the subject, but someone else must do the checking. Assessor then, of course, tutor. So assessors are responsible, as I'm sure you already know, for teaching and assessing learners against the learning aims and the assessment criteria for the course specification. Now, what I haven't mentioned, what's not on the slide, is also it should be measured against the essential information. Now, if you're familiar with the spec, you'll know that you've got the unit content, the assessment grid, and after that comes the essential information rather. And that's important to know because the learner work meets the standards if it meets the assessment criteria, but also meets the relevant essential information. So, for example, if an assessment criteria just says learners should examine some factors or several factors, you look in the essential information and that may well say 3 or 4 factors. So that is what you have to do. If there's no numbers in either and it just is a plural, then it has to be at least 2. You can choose to do more, but at least 2. Several, there's no hard and fast rule, but I would say at least 3. I mean, you want to get enough information to see your learner really understands, but you don't want to give them so many different factors, for example, that they are lost, they don't produce the quality. And in the end, look after yourselves, colleagues. You have to mark it, yeah? You're the ones that have to mark it. There's a limit because you'll be marking more than one subject. You have to look after yourself in all of this. Otherwise, it can get beyond you, and that is not what we're looking for. Okay, standards verifier. They are not the biggest scary monster. They are there as a professional friend to support you. Now, everybody gets stressed when it's standard verification time. I did. My quality nominee could never understand it because I was also an SV, but she said, I cannot understand it, but you get so panicked. And I think it's because we all want to get it right. But please try not to panic. If you've been marking steadily, you've got your IB systems in place, you've got your lead IB, and you know you're marking to the standards, there is nothing to worry about, absolutely nothing. And if you do get it a bit wrong, we help you get it right. We don't write you off as a centre. We give you time to remark. If your learners have already had a resubmission, we authorise that. And we will get you through in time for UCAS or learners leaving to go to work. Pearson Quality Advisors. Now, they're on our website, on the Health and Social Care website. If you need help with any aspect of our quality assurance process, our quality advisors will be able to help, and there is a phone number and an email address on the website. Also, while we're looking at support, we have Esther Treherne, who is the subject advisor. Esther is amazing. She's qualified in nursing and midwifery, so she understands the subject very well. We also have something called the Ask the Expert system, which you may or may not have come across. Now, your exams officer will provide you with a password and a unique number, and you can put in submit a question. You're not sure about this criteria. Learners have picked something that's not in the content, but it seems to fit. What do we think? That's the place to put in your answers, or your questions rather. We'll give you an answer guaranteed within 72 hours at the latest. We hopefully do it much more. So hopefully you'll find that useful. So let's have a look now at the structure. How's it organized? And this is particularly important. If you don't get your structure right, and this is not a threat, it's just a statement, then you can find it difficult to certificate your learners at the end of the year, and nobody wants that. So let's have a look. First of all, we'll look at this, and then we'll look at the unit. So there's certificate, extended certificate, foundation diploma, diploma, extended diploma, and a little bit off the screen is the extended diploma for health studies. All of it is worth different A levels, and all of them have different amounts of mandatory units and optional units, and obviously all have different external units. And that will become clearer when I look at the next slide. This is taken from page 4 of the specification. It goes over 2 pages, so we'll look at the next slide in a moment. Now, the 1, 2, 3, 4 different shaded units are the externally assessed ones. Those below are called optional, but there are caveats to that. So looking along the slide to your right, you will see that some units have an M, they're mandatory, and they are mandatory for certain sizes. So whatever size you're doing, for example, you will have to cover human lifespan development. For the extended certificate, not the certificate, again, it's mandatory. And then we get to smaller sizes, if you get to unit 3, it's only compulsory for the extended diplomas. And we work your way down. You can see there are different options for different sizes. So for example, unit 10, sociological perspectives, is an option for every size of the qualification except the certificate. What means that when you put your program together, you have to select the right number of mandatory and optional units to make 360 or 310, 510 or whatever it is, guided learning hours. And if you don't get those right when you put in for your certificate, there will be questions asked and there will be delays. So make sure you pick the right ones for the size of the qualification, the right combinations. The other thing I would suggest, and this is not compulsory, but when you decide on your options, think about your staff specialisms. What can you easily put together for a program? It's nice, if you look to the learners and say, which ones would you like to do? But you can think about the pitfalls, can't you? You might end up with several groups, as one of my colleagues did one year. It's a long time ago now. She asked the learners, she went in and showed them all the optional units for the second year and said, which ones would you like to study? And when I took over the course, I ended up with 6 different groups with 6 different units running at the same time. You can imagine I wasn't happy. And I don't know that I did the best job because it was too stressed. It was too stretched. So make sure that you've got your specialists that you can cover these. By all means, include people from other departments. There's no reason why the sports studies lecturer can't do anatomy and physiology. That human lifespan development could be doing with something who's not got a health and social care background. But just as long as you are coordinated, they understand the system, there's absolutely no reason why you can't spread it across the program or even across your centre, providing people want to do that, obviously. But consider yourselves, colleagues. You've got to market, you've got to IV it, you've got to manage the program. So you really don't want too many different options going at once. And this is the last one, and these are options. They're all we've got is understanding mental health and well-being for the extended diploma and biochemistry for the extended diploma. The other sizes, they wouldn't fit in at all. So that's the sort of thing you have to consider, really. Okay. And I know I've hammered this thing about, right, units for the right program, but it's so important. It will give you terrible problems otherwise. You would still get your learners through, but it would take lots of discussion and it's stressful. Okay, so let's talk about planning your program. I'll just check there's nothing in there. No. Okay. So, considerations. So, give time to your learners to acquire the skills and knowledge and practice prior to taking either an internal or external assessment. Now, you're not, the thing is, don't put your learners in for an external assessment and don't give out an assignment brief until you know they're ready. And if that means you've got to change your assessment plan, so be it. Again, look after yourselves as well as the learners, and you'll get far more less need to offer resubmissions if you use the right amount of time. However, please remember that learners are, well, you know this, you're already practicing teachers. Learners who are given too long forget about it and don't do the best work. So that's why we say don't give it out till they've got all the information. You are sure you've run your refresher, your revision class, they understand the subject well enough, you know they're ready. Again, specialisms, select where relevant, consider the staff, order, sequencing of units to ensure that they build on each other, and synoptic units are towards the end of the program. Now, the synoptic unit, one that draws in information from other units, is Unit 4, the exam unit. We strongly recommend, but we can't insist, obviously, that you program that towards the end of your learner's program in the second year. They can draw information from 1, 2, and 3, from Unit 5, Unit 6, if they're going on work experience, Unit 7, safety principles. There's an awful lot of information they can bring into Unit 4 and produce a much better piece of work at the end if they've got that background in several other units. Now, I know sometimes there is pressure from senior management to put the learners in for every exam in the first year, but we strongly recommend that Unit 4 is taught in the second year. It is easier for you, really. Okay, employers' engagement, activities, and standard verification. We've mentioned standard verification. We'll come back to that in a moment. Employer engagement. Well, they will be engaged on the larger qualifications. They're doing Unit 6, aren't they? They're doing the placement working experience. It is difficult since COVID to bring people in. I know it is, and I'll mention this again later. Case studies are fine. Video links, if that's possible. It's very hard. I don't know many people I know who work in the care centre who want to come into the local college and do a session because they simply don't have the time, and they're still worried, are they not, about infection spread. So I think it's about if you can and don't worry if you can't. It always adds experience, it adds understanding to learners. But there are lots of good case studies, and we'll look at that more later on YouTube. BBC have some good stuff. And the National Health Service and the UK Health Security Agency, they also have videos, and the Health and Safety Executive. So they're quite useful to use rather than having to bring people in. And of course, if you want thinking about people that are coming in from a charity, they usually want a donation. So that's another thing to consider. Okay. Before we mention these, we're going on to look at optional units. I hope you're all okay. Just to mention guided learning hours. They all have guided learning hours. Now, guided learning hours are what you use to teach. It doesn't all have to be stood in front of the students. You can be getting them to work in groups, in pairs. They can be working on their own work, their assignments in class. It could be supervised visits to the library or the IT suite. What it doesn't cover is if learners go off and do their own research after they've left school for the day. Yeah, it's not their visit to a local care centre because they've got a relative who's either in there or working there. That's good if they do that, but it doesn't come under guided learning hours. And they're just a guide. If you take less time to teach it, that's fine. If you need to extend it, that's also fine. So please don't feel bummed. They're a guide. a rough measurement. Okay, so otherwise it gets a bit heavy, doesn't it? Oh goodness, I've got 520 and I've not done quite that. Well, please don't take it that way. It's a guide. So mandatory and externally assessed units. We're looking at how learners get through and get the certification. Learners must achieve at least a near pass for units 1, 2, and 3. Now, a near pass is something that Pearson calculates, and I don't have any information on that. But if you miss a couple of points, or it might be just 1 point, you're nearly there, but you haven't quite got the number, and that will come clear in a while. The number of points you need to pass unit 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. They will get a near pass and they will get points for that. But that is decided by the lead examiner and the chair of the examiners. It will be approved by the regulator Ofqual. It won't be that the examiner makes that up on the day, but that is something for Pearson to decide. Mandatory internally assessed units, learners must achieve at least a pass. Now, we'll talk more about resubmissions later, but just to say at the moment, if learners don't get a resubmission, you give it them, they don't you miss a couple of passes, you can give them a retake. You would not write another task just for those 2 pass criteria, and they can have another go at the retake. Otherwise, I'm afraid they don't pass. Optional units. Learners must complete the required number for the size of qualification. Yes, I know I've said that before, but it's so important. They don't have to pass all the optional units, but say they didn't pass Unit 5, for example, they need to achieve higher than a pass in all the other units they take in order to compensate. In other words, if you don't get passed for Unit 5, say, and learners have had a resubmission and then a retake, and they've still not got CP4, they would have to get merits in everything else in order to gain certification. It seems harsh, I know, but those are the regulator rules. Excuse me. So I'm sure you know that's what we go by. Right, engaging your learners. Is everyone okay so far? It's a long session. And everybody okay? Good. Okay. Okay. So again, this is not telling you how to teach. Please accept that. I really wouldn't dream of doing that. And I'm sure you're all experienced teachers, but these are just some suggestions. Some I've made already, but offer case study as part of the resource bank. You can find these it's here, Community Magazine, Community Care Magazine. Online, you can log on, register with them, use a search engine to find them, and you can get weekly and monthly articles. There are webinars, some of which are suitable for learners to listen to. It's free. And that's the reason I use it. It's free. I come from far further north than I'm living now, and I learned not to throw money around. It seemed to be the culture when I grew up, so I wouldn't recommend it if it wasn't free. YouTube are excellent. I'm sure some of you already use YouTube. They are excellent. There's a lot of different useful things there, or in documentaries. Documentaries on the BBC or Channel 4, if you consider they're suitable. Also, if a lot of learners are, let's face it, are fans of soaps, aren't they? You can use case studies from EastEnders or Emmerdale or any of the others if you consider them suitable. Sometimes they do make a good point. They maybe need a little bit of doctoring sometimes with the language, but they do make a good point. So that's something to be used. Class discussions. Build discussions on specific issues. So, for example, we've got here Unit 19, factors that affect nutritional health, Section B2 of the unit. Sometimes you can have class discussions. Sometimes, and this is just a recommendation, it's not a suggestion, you could build preparatory tasks on a little bit of a unit for learners. If you think they're finding a particular part of a unit difficult, a little class task and a discussion might be a way of actually getting it over. Because apart from visits to the dentist and the GP, a lot of learners, when they come onto the course, they've no experience of health and social care. So something like that would be quite useful. And again, I've mentioned already, but invite health and social care professionals. This was produced, I have to say, before COVID, and we have a different landscape, don't we? We can't invite people very often. These are just some of the people that You could perhaps have a link with or find a case study about on YouTube. A community social worker, I really don't think any of them got the time to come in. Residential care manager, there are some good YouTube videos on people, or residential care managers and social workers. School nurses, they're a bit harder to find these days. Nutritionist, you may have somebody who's connected to the school who could come in or give a short talk. Representative a mental health charity, and as I stressed earlier, they may want a donation, but they do some of the like Mind and some of the other charities, they do have good videos. And it's the same with some of the campaigns. You can get good video links. They're really, really useful. And then representatives from a disability living centre. If it's ever possible, and it may not be because I don't know where you're situated, if there is a disability living centre in your town or city, it's worth arranging a visit because will show the learners lots of different helps, but also talk about how it is. However, at the minute, as you'll be aware, there's lots of stuff on the news about the Paris Paralympics and the difficulties that people are having getting around Paris. So that might be something to be useful that you could use just as a short snippet for learners. But again, all of this is suggested. You all have your own ideas, I'm sure. So let's have a look at assessment. Internal, set marked by you. We encourage people starting the course this year to use our authorised assignment briefs. They are on our website, the Health and Social Care website, under Teaching and Learning Support. And so we have ones from 5 to up to 25, so that there are a lot of them. If you use those, you can change the scenario, you can change the tasks. What you can't change is the learning aims or the assessment criteria, but I'm sure you've worked that out. I would remind you it's useful to make sure the learners have scenarios or context that they can understand. So for this level of course, the first year as a student nurse is fine. Interviews for university for maybe Unit 10 sociology is also fine, but nothing above that. So practical tasks, work-related scenarios tailored to needs. The learners, if they produce a blog or a vlog, presentations, as long as you've got observation records and your notes to give to the standard verifier are absolutely fine. Please remember, if learners work in a group to do a presentation, then you have to prove with your observation records and feedback that each one met all the criteria that required. Students demonstrating application of knowledge and skills. Well, that would be for Unit 9, Infection Prevention and Control. Learners do have to demonstrate putting on and off the personal protective equipment, PPE. They also have to demonstrate correct hand washing techniques. So that could be recorded and that's submitted to the external verifier with an observation record or your notes, and that would be sufficient. If learners, not all learners at level 3, actually want to write all the time, some do. But if you have other ideas and you guarantee that they will catch all the information they need to, plus the evaluation or the justification can be in there, then that's absolutely fine. You know as well as I do now at universities, learners don't just write the work, they have to do other forms of presentation. So it is good practice. So Alex says, when doing presentations, do you have to record it as well as the observation record? No, you don't. No. All I would say to you is that make sure your observation record is comprehensive. So you show where the learner has explained or evaluated. If you can show that in your observation record, that is absolutely fine. And keep your teacher notes, your observation notes. If for some reason your standard verifier thinks that you haven't written enough in the actual observation record, send the notes as well. That's fine, as long as you've got the fish. And even if the learners work in a group, is there a separate observation record for each one? But other than that, no, recording is not necessarily. We have to trust you. You are qualified teachers with integrity. So, and I mean, some learners just do not want to be recorded. Do they really have a problem with being recorded? I don't think we're here to punish. I think we're here to support. Also, I know some people also do a peer observation, but they don't have to. And if your learners are doing a presentation and they don't want to do it in front of the whole class, that's fine. All I need to know is that your learners have done it. That's absolutely fine. So don't put them through any more than they have to. Okay, external. So what would you find in the external? Well, some people are returners. You've been doing this before, so you have an idea already. But practical tasks, they contain everyday scenarios. They're always done under controlled conditions. Some pre-released information. So for Unit 4, you get the pre-released information. And if you're new to the course, do look out. We do inform centres when the pre-release is due for Unit 4. It will be on the website, but your quality nominee should also know. So do actually contact your quality nominee and say, have you heard anything yet? But do check the website as well. And then obviously application of learning to common workplace or work experience scenarios. And then the written exams. So that's Unit 4, the task. But for the written exams, Units 1, 2, and 3, there are practical questions requiring written responses, again under controlled conditions. Learners have got to, for the task, apply the learning to workplace scenarios. In the exams, they've got to have confidence in recalling and applying technical information and fundamental knowledge about health and social care, about people's lives, basically. We'll talk more about exams in a while, but it's really important that if you've got a group and you think they're not going to be ready for January, you put them in for January, put them in for May as well, and then they can do the resits in May. So you are confident because we want the learners to the best for their own sake, but we also want the results, don't we? Let's be honest, we want the results. For Unit 4, is a set time like the exam units for the assess window, or do you get to choose as a centre? No, you're given a time span that you can't unlock them till a certain time and you have them till a certain date to submit them. So you've got a choice to some extent, but you can't do it just sort of any time, but you will get a sort of a controlled time span. Okay, let's see if there's anybody else. Ah, right, okay. Right, move my computer on. That's better. I beg your pardon, I don't know what happened there. My computer seemed to get stuck. So internal assessment. So yeah, you get a time span, but they're not at you. There's papers are sent to your exams officer, and then you can't unlock them. There's a sort of electronic device that you can't unlock them till a certain time. And after that, you've got a certain time within you have to submit them. But they're not on the computer at the moment, no. They're marked, interesting enough, on the computer, but they're not. It would be good, wouldn't it, to have them all on the computer? A lot of learners I've taught would much prefer that, but no, at the moment we are paper-based for those. And I'm just checking. Right, okay. So internal assessment. Here we go. So this is the cycle. And let's just have a look. So first of all, you register your learners. I do believe they have to be registered in November rather. If you are late registering, you can still register, but I do believe it attracts a fee. So you don't want to, the centre doesn't want to have to pay a fee. So it's give you the names and all the details to your exams officer early, and then you will be able to register your learners. And excuse me, I think I've got a couple in check. Ah, okay, no, that's fine. It's for Olamide. Register your learners, identify a lead IB, and let me say at this stage, your lead IB needs to go onto the Pearson website and register as a lead IB. They will be instructed to download some materials and run a training session, a standardization with the team using the materials, but you will be notified when those are up online. Create an assessment plan. Now, the assessment plan will be found, if you're not already aware, if you go on our website under BTEC forms and documents with an assessment plan. Now, you don't have to use that format if you don't want to, but you do have to have all the information. And personally, I found it easier just to use the Pearson format rather than making my own up. It is a working document. It can change, but all the dates on there must be signed off by the lead IB before you issue, and dated as well, of course, dated and signed before you issue your first assignment brief. So you need to think about that when you're doing your planning. Your assessment plan must be completed before and signed off, but it can change. And when you're contacted by your standard verifier, they will ask for your assessment plan. If it's going to change or it's changed or it changes once they've got it, let them know as soon as possible. It's a working document. You do not have to keep it as is. As long as your standard verifier knows it's changed, that is fine. And sometimes things happen, don't you? You're not going to get the work in, or suddenly it's all going to happen earlier. So keep in touch with your SB when you get one. That's fine. Creating assignment briefs, when you get to writing your own, yes, you can use our template also on forms and documents. You have your internal assessment, and then we come to internal verification. Learners should not get their work back till a sample has been looked at by the internal verifier and the grades agreed. So if the IB looks at the grades and is not happy with some decisions, they can ask you to remark them as an assessor, and nothing goes back to the learners until all that process is over. Learners will be agitated, they won't like it, but just think how you'd feel as I once did. I told the learners the work was okay, and then the IB disagreed with me over one set of marks. I had to then embarrassingly have to tell the learners that I had got it wrong for one. And the learner concerned was angry for quite a while. She was a difficult student anyway, and I really sort of heard a lot about it. So it's not worth it. Authorising resubmissions. Now, the resubmissions have to be authorised, as do retakes, by the lead IB, and they have to complete the form. At the bottom part of your assessment record, again to be found on BTEC forms and documents, there's a slot for the resubmissions, and the lead IB authorises it. Gives the event a time, and to remind you, 15 working days maximum. It can be less, not over holidays, and learners have to have handed the work in. And if you suggest to submit them, suspect them of plagiarism, then you wouldn't grant a resubmission. But again, a reminder, resubmissions, learners can they can have a go at all the criteria. Even if they didn't go for the distinction the first time, they still can do that. They maybe just needed a bit more time to go for the higher grades. And then standard verification. Every year, we publish the BTEC Standards Guide for the BTEC Centre Guide rather for standards verification. All the details are in there about what to expect, the sort of samples we require for each size of the qualification, the times when your work should be sent to the standards verifier, and also on page 18, it's very important this, there is a link that if you felt you didn't agree with the standards verifier's decisions, you can appeal. And then I would be contacted then. It would come to me and I would review the work. And I would not look at the report from the standards verifier. What I would do is look against the standards so that you know you've got a fair judgment. It doesn't often happen. Okay. If for some reason the standard verified disagreed with one of your assessment decisions, you would be given a second chance. If your learners hadn't had a resubmission or you thought they were entitled to a retake, then he or she would authorize that, and they will give you a date when you've remarked everything, done any resubmissions that were necessary, and to resubmit the work. Now, on rare occasions, and it is very rare occasions, we have to delay certification a second time because the centre still hasn't got it quite right. Do not be afraid. The matter will be referred to a senior manager and they will look at the work and they will support you. Your learners will certificate by the time you need to get the work in, so they get the marks in rather, so to get the UCAS applications. We will never, never, never stop as a set of learners getting the UCAS application. So we will deal with it quickly. Any help you needed, we will give it. So it's really important that you notice that, rather. Okay, now we're on to command verbs. um, These are very important. They are attached, they prefix all the assessment criteria. I'm sorry to labor this, but if your learners produce work and they haven't explained or they haven't discussed, or whatever the verb is, even though it's a really nice piece of work, they will not meet the requirements, they will not pass. So it's important that your learners are given a glossary when you give out the assignment brief, really, or you can put it on your internet, it's easier that way. It's found on pages 280 to 281, right at the back of the specification. It has all of these command verbs and the BTEC definition for the qualification, for what we're looking for analyze, what we're looking for explain. It's really important that you have a good grasp of those, and I'm sure you do, but your learners have those before they start with the assignment brief, that you run through and say, this is what we mean, this is what we're looking for an analysis, this is what we mean for an explanation, and that they understand, for example, the difference between a description and an explanation. 10 minutes explaining that is worth a lot. It will stand you in really good stead. And I can see that people are still getting through the packs, but we don't need them yet. We'll take a short break in a moment when we haven't all got them by the time we get to the right place. But I can't stress it enough that these do matter. They're paramount importance. And often it's if the standard verifier disagrees with the marks, it's because there's been a description rather than an explanation, or there's been an explanation rather than an analysis. And that is the difference. So learn, and if you're going to grant a resubmission, you can say to the learners, well, AP1's not met because she didn't provide an explanation. Go again and look at your glossary. That's not cheating, that's not coaching, that is quite enough feedback to tell them, you've not provided an explanation, you've not told me how something works, you've not told me how something affects or causes this problem. So they are that important, and we measure by these, as I mentioned before, and the essential information which comes exactly after the assessment grid. Okay, so assignment briefs. Qualifications and units, this is what they have to include. Qualification units, assignment title. Now, assignment title, you don't have to think of a snappy title. You can put assignment 1, unit 11. That is absolutely fine. There was this thing at one time that everybody had to have these fantastic titles, but you really don't have to have them in it. You run out of ideas after a while, don't you? You really want to be doing that all the time. Handout date and deadline for submission, and the learning aims that are going to be addressed in that assignment brief. The assessor name and a vocational scenario or a vocational context. Potential sources of information. It's useful to have those at the end of your assignment brief, or they may all be on the intranet that you use. The assessment criteria, the task, and the type of evidence. So all of those are important. Any of those missing, then your learner might not have the full information. You don't need to add it, and in fact, please don't add extensive unit content. That could be viewed as coaching by your standard verifier. Just make sure learners have access to all of that before they start. But what I will also say is that whilst you have to deliver everything on the units, all the unit content, it does not all have to be assessed. You have to cover the learning aims, you have to cover the assessment criteria and the essential information for assessment decisions, but you do not have to cover it all in the brief. Your learners should be able to look at the case study and the task and think, what have I got in my notes and in other resources that I can apply to this particular case study, because what we're looking for is not a full recall of the unit content. We're looking for your learner to take the information. Consider Unit 5 with a people who have lots of different issues. We want to look at, for example, Miss Miriam Montelli, one of the case studies on the website. What does she need to help her in the information that I've been given? So they need to have all that information, but then that shouldn't all be in the assignment brief. Otherwise, it's just too cluttered and it's very confusing. And a word for the wise, if you are delivering or going to deliver Unit 11, psychological perspectives, encourage your learners not to write full histories of each psychologist. You know, so we don't want a full recall of Pavlov and Skinner and anybody else they declare to include. And that also goes for ethical theorists. So we do Johann Volks, we don't really want back all his background and why he decided to become a psychologist in that particular field. We want them to be able to apply those parts of the theory to the case study. So that if you're teaching that unit, it's a good idea to have some practice sessions looking at the theory and what can be applied to a case study. And it really does help that. Okay, feedback to learners, do's and don'ts. I will explain why when I've finished. Provide general feedback and support. Comments on evidence provided. Document criteria not achieved and why. Avoid instructions on how to achieve a higher grade. That will be seen as coaching. Unfortunately, if you do put that on, your standard verifier can consider it coaching. If there's been a resubmission, they have the authority to wind the grade back to what it was before learners had the resubmission. So it's not a threat, it's just a statement that that would happen. Annotations on scripts. Now, you don't have to use those. Do that. We like it. It helps our verification. It helps your IV, but it's not compulsory. If you don't annotate on the scripts, AP1 achieved here, AP2 achieved there, the SV might mention it in the recommendations, but it's not essential information. You don't have to do that. So please remember that. Spelling, punctuation, and grammar, feel free to correct that as you go along or in the general comments. It's good practice to see that because, I mean, if you've got a dyslexic learner, then you don't comment on every single spelling error, but you might recommend they go to see the support. But if you think they've made a real mess of some of the spelling, comment. But I will say that don't detract grades for this. So if you've got learners talking about, say, the NSPCC, if they've written it all in lowercase instead of capitals, it doesn't matter. You can put a comment on that, but it doesn't detract from the grade. So if you remember that, it doesn't detract from the grade, and nobody's going to worry about it when it's sent to the SV. Oh, there's a comment. Yeah, right. Do the authorised assignment briefs, Sheldon's asking, contain all of the criteria, or do we pick the scenarios and case studies for the summative assessments? Right, the authorised assignment briefs have the criteria that apply to the task being set. So you're going to have to cover in your assignment brief whether you're doing one or two assignment briefs for the same subject. You need all the assessment criteria for all the learning aims covered in the assessment. The authorized ones do have case studies attached, which you can use, but you don't have to. But if you change the scenario in the case studies, they must still fit with the assessment criteria for the learning aims that you're going to cover. Is that clear? Is that okay? If it's not, if you could tell me, that'd be fine. But you don't put all the so it's best to stick to me. Yes, until you're comfortable, then you can change. Once you're comfortable, you can start amending them as often as you like, really. I think that's the thing to do. But if you are, even when you're writing your own, if you're assessing, say, learning aims A and B, then you need to include all the assessment criteria that cover learning aims A and B. But you don't put C and D in if they're not going to be tested. The other thing to say is when you look at the qualification, the spec, you will see that some criteria are combined for distinction. So AB.D2 or BC.D2, that means that both learning aims must be included in the assessment, in the task. You can't just separate those two criteria separately. They've got to be assessed together. So otherwise the learners don't get the grade. So, you've got task 1, AP1, AP2, AM1, AD1, and you're also covering learning aim B, and AB1, ABD1. It's all got to be in the same task. So you can't divide them. And please, when you're writing your own, don't set passes, merits, and distinctions in separate tasks. Learners at this level should be aiming for distinction, and if they will pick up the pass and merit on the way. But don't divide them up past merit and distinction. We're looking for holistic writing. Now, if the learners presented it past merit and distinction, they wouldn't fail. The SV would mark it down. But in the recommendation section, we would say in future, please incorporate past merit and distinction in the same task. Because when they go to university, you and I all know, don't we, that learners will not get chance to hand it back into the merit. They won't get opportunity to the merit separately. They'll have to present distinction level or whatever level all at the same time. Okay, stated the resubmissions being approved and submission date, so that should go in your feedback too. Now, as I said earlier, but I stressed this, you do not have to give a resubmission. You will have a good reason. Maybe a learner they haven't got time, they've got too many outstanding assignment briefs. The last resubmissions in other units, they just haven't managed it. They're not at the level of anything other than the pass or the merit. Then that's fine. You are justified in saying, I'm sorry, but I'm not giving a resubmission this time. And whatever you do, don't allow or authorize rather resubmissions for all the units. Learners would never keep up. You know that they wouldn't. And remember how much extra marking you've got to do and how much extra IV you've got to do. So it is about looking after yourself and your own emotional well-being as well as the learners. I know you give the last ounce to your learners, but look after yourself as well. Okay, resubmissions. Start assignments when learners are ready. So you're going to the lead IB is going to authorize them. Again, 15 working days. Don't include a holiday and within the same academic year. So I've got to finish before the end of the academic year, be that Christmas or the summer. It's got to be done within that year. You can't come back and work on something again. Now, in the old QCF, learners could do that, but they can't any longer. So that's something to be remembered. And as I've already said, learners shouldn't resubmit every assignment. The other thing is, you think learners can get the work done in 3 days of resubmission, or just 7 days, then allow that 7 working days. You don't have to give 15 every time. So it's important to remember that. And there is a link on the screen. There's a YouTube video that will show you about resubmissions as well. And I have a question coming up. Is there a list of extenuating circumstances for resubmission? No, there isn't really. If your learner has kind of the working on time, you agree that it's authentically their own, and you think that they can do it, actually achieve more with the extra time given, then you will allow it. If your learner needs longer because they've been ill, you need to apply to Pearson, and it's on our website. There is a special considerations form that you need to fill in and submit, and then you can have extra time. It will often come to me and ask if I will allow it, and of course I will. So that's a different thing, but you will only allow resubmissions if you think the learner can do it, can upgrade. If you honestly don't think they can't, then it's up to you to explain to the learner that I'm sorry, but I think you'd be wasting your time. But otherwise, it's up to you, the choice. They may have all sorts of reasons why they didn't get it the first time, but you know that in a bit more time, a week or 15 working days, yes, they can have another go. They should at least get the merits, if not the distinction, or even they just missed a distinction by a couple of bits. And yes, by all means allow it, but it's entirely your judgment. Okay, now I'm hoping everybody has got the work for activity 1, you will need the learner work, the Unit 5 specification, and the SSV commentary. So you'll need to familiarise yourself with the unit specification if you haven't already. Review the learner work, has it been accurately assessed? Now, it's 5:05 and we finish at past. So I'm going to ask you to look at one learning aim or two learning aims A and B, and see whether you think the learner work has been met accurately. Have a look at, and then it says review your findings with the SSV commentary. Were your review findings in line with that? Well, when you've finished, if people could tell me in the chat box, I will share my screen and put up the SSV commentary up on there. So if everybody's happy, you've got the materials now, have a look at learning aims A and B. Do you think that the learner work has been accurately assessed? Do you agree with the assessor? And if not, why not? So if we say 10 minutes, it's 5 past my watch. So if we finish by 1/4 and I'll share my screen with the SSV commentary and we'll have a quick run through. Is everybody okay with that? It's just a quick look at A and B. So we're starting at the level 3, unit 5, meeting individual care and support needs. And I'm going to go through and I'll explain exactly why the learner hasn't got everything and why we thought that it did some. So AD1, the learner has included information regarding the importance of promoting equality and diversity for the selected people, but there's no evaluation. There is some related reasoning within the evidence, but they haven't evaluated the level of importance. So they've said why, but they haven't said exactly by how much. Does it make much difference? And they've not given a full justification. Therefore, AD1's not met and the assessor's been right in what their judgments. So it's important that we want to know not just why, we want to know about how much. Are other factors more important that have affected that service user? Or is it the fact that promoting equality and diversity has helped that person a lot to settle in, to feel they can access the services? BCD2, we felt that they've made the correct judgment. The learner has made lots of suggestions for overcoming challenges and referring briefly to the individuals, but they've not fully justified why all of the strategies and techniques they've used or recommended by professionals, how they've actually helped people to overcome ethical issues and challenges. They've got 3 individuals with diverse needs, a lot of problems, health and social care. And although they recommended the strategies and techniques, they've suggested that social workers, the nurses, whoever else, the physios come in, should use those for overcoming challenges. In other words, making daily living easier. They haven't actually said the reasons why. Because if you don't get the reasons why, well, you might as well assume that you'll use something else instead. So learners have got to have a confidence and give sound reasoning justifying why they suggested building up a relationship, why they suggested using maybe BSL sign language, which is sign language if the individual has a hearing impairment. Why they said that, what are the reasons? And they haven't really done that. Okay. Now the assessor awarded AM1, and we really did feel as a senior team that they were incorrect in awarding this. The learner has explained the importance of promoting equality and diversity. They haven't provided an analysis. Now, analysis would be a careful consideration or the results of a consideration, examination of the impact of promoting equality and diversity. What difference would it really make at the level of the qualification? So they've tried, but we felt it was below level 5, that part. Okay, AM2. The learner has provided an explanation of the different methods that might be used to build relationships and establish trust, but they've not provided an assessment. They've not looked at it in detail. What factors are more important, which is the least important, discussing and placing them each factor that is or method that's used to build relationships, what works best, what might not work as well, but still important. And so the assessor has been too generous. Okay. BM3, while the learner has explained, I've been very harsh, aren't I? But you cannot give marks away where learners have not earned them. And that's a possibility. While the learners explain the ethical principles, how they could be incorporated, they've not provided, again, a full analysis of exactly how the ethical approach would benefit Mira, Sam, and Isaac. They've not looked at, exactly why in full detail. It doesn't go beyond an explanation, and therefore the assessor is wrong. So it's important that, going back to the command verbs and the essential information, that the assessor, when you're marking, you make sure that you have a good understanding of what those verbs mean, that your learner understands too. Okay. The learner evidence for this criterion is general, so CM4 is very general. There's no explanation. Again, there's no assessment. The learners, I don't think they've understood what an analysis is or an assessment for these two criteria. AP1, the learner has explained the importance of promoting equality and diversity with the three selected individuals. They made the correct judgments in this instance, stating the learner has met AP1. Again, AP2, the learner has met AP2, comprehensive explanation of the skills and attributes required. BP3, now this one could be a little bit contentious, and we had a discussion in the group, in the senior team. It was brief, but we still felt the learner had explained in sufficient detail at level 3 how to incorporate ethical principles. CP4, the learners provided an explanation of the strategies and communication techniques to support individuals in overcoming challenges. They've referred to appropriate theories, and what they've done, as I said, referred to them. They haven't given us all a full explanation of where this particular psychologist came from, what set him on the road to discovering ethical theories. So they've done what they've asked to, and that's my point with all the work. You are looking for an application. And then CP4, although general in places, the learner has included a good explanation of what was required, benefits of personalization. And so overall, we felt the learner's work was at a level 3 pass, I beg your pardon. They've met the passes, they have not met the higher criteria. Okay. And we'll move on to external assessment. Now, here we go. Some questions. Is it possible to see sample work that has met merit and distinction? Daniel's asking, yes. If you go on our website, we've got some exemplar learner work for level 3, pass merit and distinction, and you can access it there. So it's for Unit 5, so you might find that useful. And Helen, you said, can you put a word count on the assignment brief? No, sorry. No, you can't. What I suggest, Pearson doesn't like this word counts. However, what I suggest is that you give learners verbally or on the whiteboard, or even as a separate list, suggested word count, so that they understand that if they don't meet the word count or they go over, they will not be marked down. You can't cap them for that, but you can give them suggestions. Because learners, especially in the first year, they need a lot of guidance, don't they? But just don't put it on the assignment brief, and then that will be absolutely fine. Okay, right. So there are external assessments. So we're going to look at 4 different types of external assessment for BTEC assessments, which I know we've mentioned already, so it won't take too long. You will find the instructions for conducting external assessments on our website, on our exam page. And your exams officer should already have a copy. You can ask for that. Set tasks, performance tasks, not usually for the health and social care. Paper-based written tests, yes, we do have those. We don't have on-screen tests for this qualification. So enter external units onto Pearson website now, onto their online setting. Now, it's your exam officer's job to enter your learners and the units that you are covering, but you need to give them to them in plenty of time. The external assessments that May and June, January, May and June rather, and then the results. The results will be published and you will be I would say warned, but informed ahead of the time when the results are due, and you will be given access. Your exams officer will have that and they will pass it on to you. So different times of external assessment. What can your learners expect? Written exams, units 1, 2, and 3 are written exams. The task, unit 4, is a two-parter. So A, research articles issued 4 weeks prior to a supervised assessment, and part B, 4 extended response questions. And there will be pre-release, and you will be informed when pre-release is out on the website. So watch out for that. Again, on the exams page. When we mark the questions, your learners' answers, we mark the bigger, longer questions with indicative content. So we have a list of content. So we can, unless it specifically says they have to have something particular, we can be generous. We judge it on what the learner's whole performance is. Do make sure that you understand the command verbs and the learners do. They're each on the unit spec, and they may differ in definition to the internal one, so be sure of that. And then we use Bloom's taxonomy, and you can use that to prepare your learners. And they do have vocational context, so learners need to be used to, well practiced in answering practice questions that have a vocational context. So will always be a header, a rider at the top. So again, when are they available? Unit 1, January, May, and June. And they are 1 hour and 30 minutes. Marks available 90 for Unit 1. For Unit 2, they're 80, and for Unit 3, they're 90. And they're a mix of short and long answers. And encourage your learners to spend time practicing so that they don't waste time taking too long of a short answer. You know, if you've got a 4 marker, you want learners to do it well, but they need to measure the time so they spend longer on the 6, 8, 10 markers. Otherwise, they're going to lose a lot of marks that way. Unit 4 availability, December, January, and May, Part A and B. Length, Part A is 8 to 10 hours of independent research plus 6 hours of monitor preparation. And then Part B is a 3-hour exam. Marks available are 65. Task, a mix of short and long answers. Preparing your learners. So unit content and essential information. Outlines the content requirements. Access it, please, to inform teaching and learning activities. Access the learner reports. They're always published on our website once the learner results are finished for an exam. So May, they'll be published in June. The results are published in June, and then you'll get the examiner reports. Mock assessments, make use of previous papers, and on our website there's the link, so something called the Exam Wizard, to help you develop your own mocks to formatively assess your learners' understanding. Let's check the chat. No, there's no questions. Key terms. Share the tables of key terms at the end of each unit as part of revision for your learners and for mock tests. They obviously can't take them into the real exam, but they can use them in the mock test. So grading. Internally assessed units are mentioned numbers before, though. If learners don't meet anything for a 60 GLH to get and a 90, they don't get any points. For a pass, it's 6 for 60, 90 gets 9. Merit get 10, 15, 16 for distinction, and 24. Now, all become clear when I look at slide after this. And then for external, you can see that the numbers, the marks are different. You get 6 for a near pass, 80 for 120, 9, 15, 24 for the 90, and the 120. So some units are obviously large, like Unit 4, 8, 12, 20, and 32. And these points do matter. So I'm not going to go through all of it. You'll really be even more bored, so we won't do that. But you can see that for different qualifications, point threshold adds up to a pass, merit, or a distinction, a double pass or a triple pass, etc. These are the thresholds. So for extended certificate, for a pass, you need 36. To get a merit, you've got to get 52. So even if you got 51, if a learner got 51, they'll still be able to pass. It's important that learners know about these and they begin to calculate their grades with you to know what they're aiming for, particularly if they have a UCAS offer. So Human 1 lifespan development. This paper is assessed through this unit is passed through a paper-based written exam, January and May, 1.5 hours, total of 90 marks, 30 marks for each of the 3 questions and their subsections. And you'll be aware, won't you, that question 1 will be divided into sections, etc. Question-based scenarios to allow students to apply their knowledge and understanding, which is why I said make sure they know all of the content, make sure they understand all of the content. It includes 5 longer formats, 10-mark level-based questions, and again, so that learners can have practice. They need practice on the papers so they understand what to spend a lot of time on and what not to spend such a lot of time on. It's all about technique, really. There's some very clever learners, and they don't always pass because they don't have the right exam technique, and the only way to get it is practice, isn't it? So now I'm hoping people have got, I know lots of people have the mark scheme for Unit 1. So I'll put the activity on the board, on the screen rather, and I'd like you to look at the mark scheme and decide what you think this learner should get. So Sarah and Timothy are the parents of Joshua, who is 3 years old. Sarah is pregnant and she and Timothy are looking forward to the birth of their second child. Joshua is currently in the stage of early childhood, and learners have to identify in the correct order the 4 life stages that follow early childhood. So how many marks would you give and why? So if the learner we only awarded for stages identified in the correct order, therefore it was vital for the learner to identify adolescence, early childhood, middle adulthood, and later childhood in the right order. This example given, which you haven't been able to see, 2 marks would be awarded for middle adulthood and later adulthood. So in other words, the learners wouldn't get it all because they didn't get them all in the right order. Okay, so activity 3, and obviously not everybody's got the right marks either. So describe the concepts of growth, explain the difference between growth and fine motor skills. So how many marks would be available for this? I beg your pardon. So 1C, every description must be accurately expanded to be given the 2 marks available for each one. 1 mark awarded for the first response and 2 marks awarded for the second, because the response for growth is not expanded to an extent to justify the second mark. So what we would be looking for here is an expansion of the first point. What guidance would you give your learners to improve their response? So what would you be looking for? What advice, rather, would you give if you were preparing your learners and you were using this as a mock paper? What advice would you give them to make sure they got as many marks as possible for this? When explaining, use examples. Thank you. And I would add to that, refer to the right of the case study at the top of the question, yes. And be concise, Alex, you're saying, yes, you're not looking for waffle, are you? It's a very untechnical term, but that's the bottom line, isn't it? You're not looking for waffle. And then Sharon is saying a description of both, giving plenty of detail, yes. So they want to, practice should include, shouldn't it? Writing concisely, but giving sufficient detail so that they've covered it. And Kelly, thank you. You're saying ask them to give a definition of both, then explain what each one means and how it differs. Yes, that's actually it's a really good answer, Kelly. Thank you. So they're setting their scene, they're helping themselves by giving a definition and then expanding on it. Do learners need to, Sharon's asking, do learners need to include references? Not in exams, no. Now, if in coursework, learners should, if they quote, should reference in text, and they should certainly give a bibliography. But we're not looking for references in exams. No, that's too much. And I think it puts too much pressure on memory. So no, we don't ask for references in exams. But as you've asked the question, I will say, that in the coursework, in the internal work, if the essential information says refer to reference to research, then there's no reference to research and the learners won't get the grades. So not in external, but certainly in internal. So internal assessment, find your exam date, changes to the final timetables are made after they're published and they're summarized in our information page. So dates could change for all sorts of reasons, including the regulators saying that they're too early or something like that. Sana, you said do references include direct quotations or citations for internal? It's preferable, but it's not compulsory. So if your learner actually refers to the research and say in a study by Brunner or Rogers, in a study by Carl Rogers, he says this, that's fine. If it's translated into their own words, they don't have to include in text. And is Harvard the preferred method of referencing? I'd like to say yes, please, because I find it easier to cope with, but you don't have to. We don't set one. So as long as it's a recognizable one, whichever your learners you find easier to teach, the one that you know about, whichever one you used in uni yourself, I think. But otherwise, there isn't a preferred one, no. So this is here from your a slip on the right-hand side of the screen, finding your exam date, and it gives you a timetable. So do look, that's last 2 years ago, obviously, we can't put this year's up yet, but do keep checking it because if there are any changes, and there might be to dates, you need to be prepared for that. External assessment, our easy-to-use past paper search gives you instant access to a large library of past exam papers and mark schemes. They're available free to teachers and students. Only you can access the most recent papers sat within the 9 months, and they're the best ones to use. So please do use them. Exam Wizard, it's a free exam preparation tool. It is, I hate to be corny, but it's magic. It works like magic. It helps, it saves you time. It helps you create your own mocks, topic tests, homework or revision activities in minutes. Really, really useful. I can't recommend it high enough. It links directly to associated examiner reports and mark schemes. I wouldn't bypass it. I really wouldn't. And that's how it looks. So that's what it looks like. But we'll have to move on because we're running out of time and I'm sorry. Results Plus. It's another program. It's an online results analysis tool. Gives you a detailed breakdown of your learners' performance in our external assessments. You can analyze performance, identify areas for further learning, and that's good for resits, compare performance, and access data reports. It can help reduce the amount of test retakes, keep track of your learner class performance, monitor the understanding of topics, and make teaching a much more personal experience. And further resources, we have free course materials, our specifications, sample assessment materials, and the lots of other support materials to sample our BTEC qualifications. Now we have published resources which you don't have to buy. You can use other people's endorsed resources on the publishing house if you wish. I recommend you use the ones that have been endorsed by Pearson because then you'll know they are accurate and we will approve them. So Edexcel Online is our self-service portal for you. You provide administrators with support. It also gives teaching staff access to services including standardization materials, online bookings for training events, access to our resources and Results Plus, which are all secure. And then training from Pearson if you wish to access other training for other other courses, particularly the Redeveloped Tech Award, then you can go look at those online as well. Just to remind you, there are lots of YouTube videos on, and we also provide those on our website. Lots of Pearson produced videos. And then just a reminder on our Pearson support on the portal and on the website, there are lots and lots of pieces of information. Make use of it all. That is why it's there. You have paid to run the course. Make use of everything we offer.